I kept the recording of Paul, the leader, talking about how to impregnate your wife with a female because they need more girls, because their girls are more valuable, because the men are the worker bees, but the girls are the ones bringing in more, souls to the kingdom of God. You need to marry all of Paul's sons because those ones are the closest related to Jesus Christ himself. They don't say this stuff, but you see them numbering out the men. My dad's number is number 36. We have up to 200 numbered men, right? That they're numbered men. They're like high up in the church. I was supposed to marry Paul's full brother's son, so I would be closer Kingston. But then that would mean I'm marrying incest, right? And his parents were siblings because she had to marry closer. And what's closer than being one of the leader's kids, right? So you just have to marry each other, because at that point, women always marry up. And it's kind of like their placement in heaven. And my mom has said it before, like, I feel like they're breeding us like cattle, like I'm always barefoot and pregnant. You don't even get breaks in between it because they're so focused on the numbers. Procreate, bring as many babies to the earth. You're wasting time, even to the point where when David Kingston was in prison, his wives were all magically still getting pregnant. How were they all getting pregnant? She went in thinking that they did something special to her husband's sperm, but it was actually the brother's sperm, and she's actually having the brother's child. And the brother and him knew, but she has no idea.
Wow.
This is where the blood testing comes in.
Hey, my name is Shalise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening, go to YouTube instead, where you can join in on the conversation and leave those words of encouragement. And we just love it when you interact with the post in any way. It, of course, boosts the algorithm, helps more people see the episode, and it makes our guests feel so loved and welcomed. Thank you for being such an amazing community. Okay, today's guest, you love her. We've had her on many, many, many times. She flew into Los Angeles just for this upcoming episode, which is our 200th episode. This one is 199. We are going to film with 7 powerhouse women, including this guest today, and talk about all the different ways that their each individual cults are similar yet different, how they control women, how women can stand in their power. It's gonna be incredible. You're not gonna want to miss it. So definitely hit subscribe, hit the bell so you're notified the second it drops. So today's guest, we wanted to talk more about fundamentalist Mormonism within the order, which is the incestuous polygamous cult based in Utah. She was born and raised in it. She speaks out about it now, has her own YouTube channel dedicated to it. Thanks for joining us, Amanda Rae.
Thank you for having me. Hello.
So we're like, what insidious topic could we cover today? And then we got on the topic of Jesus, and she's like, you're not going to believe this. And so here we are. We are talking about how not only do the order members claim they are direct descendants of Jesus Christ himself, they claim that Jesus Christ was also a polygamist. Yeah. That blew my mind. And I was like, Amanda, okay, we need to talk about this. But first, we need to talk about the bloodline thing, because I'm vaguely aware that you guys are made to memorize the lineage back to Jesus. And because you are related to Jesus, you have to, quote, keep the bloodline pure, which means incest. Just give us the scoop on this, please.
Yeah, I think there's so much to dive into on this, but it's like... we were taught of I'm going to try to simplify it, because I feel like if I try to jump in too much, it's going to convolute everything. But so Christ himself, first of all, he's white. We already discussed that. We covered that, right?
According to the order, Jesus was white.
Mm-hmm. They would change pictures of him, edit them to make him look more white, lighter eyes and stuff like that. But they reference the verse. I can't remember what exact verse it is, but it talks about keeping the 12 tribes of Israel. So there's specific bloodlines that are in the 12 tribes of Israel. And I remember being taught that that is what's related to Christ. And those are the people that will be walking with God at some point, right? They would talk in church about Kingston, the last name Kingston being Kingstone. They were very prideful of the last name Kingston.
Where does the last name Kingston come from? For someone who's never seen your videos and like, what are you even talking about? Why is Kingston the best name to have when you are in the order?
Honestly, just because it's related to Paul, but the leader, but they
Okay.
have this underlying, if you think of like the royal families, how like to be married in the royal family is this privilege, right? Back in the day, there was a lot of incest because of that, right? To
Yeah.
keep the lineage in there. And so it's a similar thing in the Kingston group where you have to marry as closely to Paul. And you'll see this in the women specifically. The women will marry closer Kingston. You will never see a Kingston woman marrying down in the bloodline unless they are like leaving to do it. Or I only know of one of Paul's daughters that actually did get to do it because she was going to leave the order and they didn't want that on Paul's family. So it was like a weird, she's on her way out. So we'll just maybe in hopes of letting her do what she wants, she'll stay, but she left anyways.
Just to clarify, when you say marry up, you're saying you need to marry someone who's like your uncle or older versus marrying someone who's like your second or third cousin?
That's a good, sorry, you're right. I'm not clarifying. Marrying up in the bloodline means marrying closer related to Paul. So I'm like, take me for example, I am Kingston because my dad's half brothers with Paul. So I was supposed to marry Paul's full brother's son. So I would be closer Kingston. But then that would mean I'm marrying incest, right? And his parents were siblings because she had to marry closer. And what's closer than being one of the leader's kids, right? So you just have to marry each other because at that point, but you'll see men marrying down, right? So less Kingston, but you won't see women marrying down. Women always marry up. And it's kind of like their placement in heaven in a way, because you want to be, and again, they don't say this in church, like you need to marry all of Paul's sons because those ones are the closest related to Jesus Christ himself. They don't say this stuff, but you see them numbering out the men, right? So my dad's number is number 36. Right, yeah. His number is 36. We have up to 200 numbered men, right? That they're numbered men. They're like high up in the church. I feel like it would be similar to maybe bishops in your church, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
But they're giving these numbers, and there was a lot of talk about the Bible verse of 144,000 will walk with God.
Uh-huh.
So there's a link where people believe that they're numbering up to 144,000 to get into the kingdom of God. But you can only get these numbers in this group. And you notice that these numbered men are usually Kingston men, right? But they have a belief that that bloodline is so pure because it's directly linked to Christ. And they also say, because the question of like, okay, you're living polygamy, because polygamy is the celestial law. That's the only people in the celestial kingdom are polygamous. But Christ didn't get married. That's the age-old question in the group. So they're like, oh, actually, he did. And in fact, he was a polygamist and he had kids. But where's this verse? Which is crazy that you weren't raised with that, because Joseph Smith preached polygamy. So weren't they asking those same questions? Joseph Smith, if this is the celestial marriage is a law in heaven, why isn't Jesus Christ living the celestial law?
Okay, I have many questions. How do you rewind? How do you get a number? Who's number one?
Number one was, so this is where it gets interesting. Number one was the person who started the order, but in the beginning, it was just numbering whoever joined the order, and it wasn't a religion at the time. It was a co-op in 1935, right? So Brother Eldon was number one. He starts numbering out these people. I think it went all the way up to, I want to say in the 40s, and then he passes away. And then Ortel comes in to be the leader, and he's my grandpa now, so my dad's dad. And he only gave out 4 numbers, didn't really find a use for the numbering system. And then Brother Paul gets into the leadership, and I think he figured out a way to dangle a number in front of a man to get him to, work for minimum wage for the kingdom of God and give all of his daughters to him in hopes that he can get, I've seen men get their numbers on their deathbed. Like, thank God I finally got my number so it's my ticket to heaven. That's how they treat it. So it's evolved into a brownie point system, which I don't know.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't know if it was all the leadership's doing or the members kind of giving it so much value and him realizing how much value the members were giving it. So he's like, oh, and who started saying that it was 144,000? Who started saying it's your ticket to heaven? Who started saying that, we are direct descendants of Jesus Christ himself? Where did that all come from? Because I know that it didn't come in the very beginning times, right?
That's what's so interesting, because that's why I circled back, because when you're saying that once you get to 144,000, that's it. But if you're direct descendants of Christ, I would assume Jesus would be one, and then you got how many thousands of people, and then you guys. So to have like 132, 90 seems like it wouldn't be correct based on what it's morphed into being.
That's such a good point, too. And to think like, okay, so if Christ has kids, too, then his kids would also be numbered in there, right? Because you're walking with Christ. So those questions are now unanswered. But yeah, they believed that one of Christ's wives was, the woman that was going to get stoned, and then Christ saved her from getting stoned.
Yeah. Was she a prostitute, or am I not remembering that? Well, and he said, he without sin cast the first stone.
Yeah, but I remember in the order they said he came in to protect her. They thought she was a prostitute, but it was actually because she was just pregnant with Jesus's baby, and they didn't want them to know. Like, this whole story on she was actually not a prostitute. He just was trying to protect his wife. But they couldn't know that she was the wife, because then they would kill her but this is the questions that I had in the order was, so if Jesus had family, how come we don't know about them? Oh, because they was trying to protect them. Okay, but they didn't kill his mom, Mary. It wasn't like they were out to murder his whole family. They were just trying to get him, right? I don't know.
What they say about Mary Magdalene?
Was that the girl that was supposed to get stoned?
No, Mary Magdalene, and you guys, you can fact check me on this because I don't really know that well, but it's my understanding that it is very high in speculation and probability that Mary Magdalene was Jesus's boo thing. And so I wondered if they brought her up, because I think historically that actually does hold some credence, unless it's just folklore and people have passed it down and I'm ill-informed. But that's what I have heard in the past, is that he was with Mary. So I'm surprised that they didn't grab onto that, because there actually is something there.
They did, but I thought that Mary Magdalene was the girl that got stoned. So I think that they were sister wives then. I think that's the part that's not linking in my brain, because I remember them talking about Mary Magdalene and that it was with Jesus, but that I thought that she was the girl that got stoned. So it was her and her.
I clearly don't know my Bible stories. I was reading the Book of Mormon.
I know. The more I researched too, the more I would just be confused. And this is the hard part when you come out of this. You probably had this happen too, because we were so indoctrinated, Doctrine and Covenants, Pearl of Great Price, all of that stuff. Then you go to like a Christian church, and I remembered our stuff, and I thought that it was in the Christian Bible.
In the Bible?
Like, yes.
What about Lehi and Nephi?
Mm-hmm. I'm like, how come you guys aren't talking about Nephi? You remember that story? And they're like, what?
Oh my gosh. It's interesting, because I always knew growing up, and I don't think I've clarified yet in this video if you're new here, I grew up mainstream Mormon, not the polygamous kind. I was definitely aware that the Bible was separate, because they were always like, the Book of Mormon is the keystone. Like, you have what were the two pillars? It was the Bible and something else, and then the Book of Mormon. And if you don't have the Book of Mormon, everything just falls apart. And so that's kind of my awareness of it. And we just didn't really do much reading in the Bible unless it was to cross-reference the Book of Mormon, which Joseph Smith put in there to be like, oh, wow, look at cross-reference. No, you wrote it down so that it would fit the Bible. But yeah, so it would correlate, but it's not. Anyway.
Yeah, we did that too, where it was the Book of Mormon was very hyper focused on. Like, I remember at the beginning of the year, a lot of people's New Year's resolution was so we had this running joke where everyone knew word for word the first book of Nephi, because that was the very beginning, and then everyone would fall off the New Year's resolution. But we never did that with the Bible, from what I remembered. It was always let's focus on the Book of Mormon. Let's focus on this, which is funny, because you would think that if it's a church of Christ, let's talk about like the New Testament and Christ's, second coming, whatever, all of that other stuff. But I don't know. They really hyper focus on.
Well, that's why they didn't want you to read the Bible. They didn't want you to realize that they were just making stuff up.
Do you ever wonder if they know they're making stuff up, and they're just like, all these men, they're just like bros in this room, like laughing?
They have to, right? Let's get the women to conform and accept polygamy by telling them that Jesus did it.
And they're like, yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I don't know. It really makes you wonder. It's okay. So anyway, Jesus Christ, according to the order, was a polygamist, and you are offspring from his line.
Right. So you are speaking to. You are so lucky to be speaking today with Jesus Christ's great granddaughter.
Wow, I'm honored.
So honored. This is where the blood testing comes in, right? Because obviously you can't inbreed that much until there's going to be deformities, right?
Yeah, and we
So,
did a whole video on the birth defects of the order, and we probably should have researched a little bit more beforehand. And some things were taken, like I said some things, and I should have clarified, and people were a little upset. But this is us trying to fix it. There are there are definite things that come about when you inbreed like that.
right.
And you were talking about some of the deformities that you witnessed.
Hmm.
We were talking about some of the mental health things that you had witnessed. And all of that to say that certain chromosomes, if you're just in a gene pond instead of a gene pool, if it's a really small pool of chromosomes, chances are you could inherit something. It's more likely to inherit something than
Right.
if you are diversified.
Right. I've also wondered if that's why a lot of members get cancer. Like, I know we've talked about how comfrey can cause cancer and they're all drinking comfrey, but what about genetically?
Yeah,
Ortel died
that's
of
true.
cancer. My grandma died of cancer. They're all dying of different cancers. And then you're breeding with each other. And now your kid is more likely to have these bad genetics because you guys are
Mm,
inbreeding so much. So, yeah, you're going to be more likely to get those types of issues by inbreeding over and over and over. And I'm curious what kind of stuff they're testing for with the blood testing. I guarantee there's a lot of trial and error going on because they don't know what they're doing. But
yeah.
they figured it out to a point where they know who to put with who, in a sense, so that they can start getting pregnant and actually having healthy. I mean, your definition of healthy might be different than mine, right? Healthy kids, because you think of how Ortel, when he first started doing the incest, he could not with his niece, his first wife, he could not keep any of the kids alive. They were either stillborn or they would die like right after birth, and so they figured out some form of blood testing to figure out what genes is it that I have that can't mix with, this person. But that doesn't, just because you can have the child doesn't mean that there's not going to be now underlying issues that child's having.
Yeah, it's so heartbreaking and sad that the children's are the one who suffer because of this disgusting practice of what they think is valiant for the group,
Yeah.
for the members, because just putting a child's life at risk and them not even surviving a few days is awful. And thinking about the poor mother who had to deliver that baby, who went through that
Hmm.
entire pregnancy, I can't imagine being in that situation and also probably feeling like it's your fault that these things are happening to your children is horrible,
Oh, and
horrible.
I'm sure I've heard so many stories of them blaming the women because the women are, it's this reoccurring issue in a lot of these cults where the women's to blame and the men can do no wrong. And so here's the woman just doing everything she's told, marrying her brother, and then having all these complications. And then how come you can't get pregnant and have these kids? Like, your only use as a woman is to be bringing souls to the kingdom of God, and you can't even do that right. So then there's all this shame tied to they just lost their kid, and now they have to just try to start out as fast as possible. I wonder if these women go through, like, and my mom has said it before, like, I feel like they're breeding us like cattle, like I'm always barefoot and pregnant. So it's like you don't even get breaks in between it because they're so focused on the numbers, right? And even Paul
Yeah.
has, I just recently posted a video. In the very beginning, I kept the recording of Paul the leader talking about how to impregnate your wife with a female, right? Because they need more girls, because their girls are more valuable, because the men are the worker bees, but the girls are the ones bringing in more, souls
Kids.
to the kingdom of God. So he's telling them what positions, basically, like when to be with your wife. There's certain ways to be with your wife to increase the likelihood of having a daughter. So
Hmm.
it's like, at what point you're doing blood testing, you're telling them how to have sex, you're controlling so much of it. Where is God in all of this? Where's, you
Hmm.
preach so much of direction, and that God, with God, you'll know what to do, and with your direction and with your relationship with God, that's how we're running this whole religion. But you're doing blood testing to see who can marry who. So now God flies out the window on that, because you're deciding at that point. You're not having
Yeah.
faith, like you're saying. You're doing now. Now a lot of them are having to do IVF because a lot of the
Yeah.
men are sterile, right? So now you're also playing. You're playing God at this point. You really should just say, "I am God. I am God now," because that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I think that the people have to have that blind faith and just follow him, and then I don't know, because I think if they use any critical thinking and they see it for what it is, they'll be like, what the hell is going on here?
Also, something that I just looked into, and I want to do more research, but I heard that most of the time miscarriage and chromosomal abnormalities are due to the man's sperm. So if they're sitting here blaming these women for stillbirths or miscarriages or anything going wrong, it's actually probably just the one guy who's trying to spread his seed to all these women.
Yep. I 100% think that half the time it is the man's issue, because you'll see like sometimes where multiple of the wives are having issues getting pregnant.
Yeah.
What are you going to blame all the wives? Like the common denominator is you. They have to deflect it on the woman because they don't want to stop their chances of getting more wives. So it has to be not their fault, right?
Did you ever hear, I mean, you have a whole video with The Handmaid's Tale and it feels like this. Did you ever hear of women who would sleep with other men just so they could get pregnant, thinking that it was their husband that was the issue?
I heard of I wasn't there, but I heard it from multiple sources, including someone who was in the order at the time. And they said that this woman could not start out, she could not get pregnant, and they found out, the woman didn't know. The brother found out that it was because the brother was having plenty of kids with all of his wives. He's like, how come you're not getting pregnant? So they did tests on the sperm, found out that it was the sperm. So then they have his wife go in to the order clinic to try to do like I guess, what's it called? IVF or they said it was some type of...
It's the one where they just put the sperm in the turkey baster thing and manually...
Like that. Yeah. I don't know the terms or what was...
I don't know what it is either.
Yeah. But the way I was told was she went in thinking that they did something special to her husband's sperm, but it was actually the brother's sperm. And she's actually having the brother's child. And the brother and him knew, but she had no idea.
Wow. That's so messed up. That is so messed up.
Yeah, I don't know how often that happens. I don't know how, because they are so big on just procreate, bring as many babies to the earth. You're wasting time, even to the point where when David Kingston was in prison, his wives were all magically still getting pregnant. How were they all getting pregnant?
Right. Nephi talked about this. I think it was Nephi on an episode. Are you related to Nephi?
Yeah, Nephi's Daniel's son, so he would be my dad. His dad and my dad are half brothers, so we're cousins.
Okay. So he was talking about how I think it was Daniel took him to the clinic that is their own clinic. It's not really licensed in any way, as far as I'm aware. And he was showing him all of the sperm samples of all of the men. So if they go to prison, their wives can still get pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
I think we need to go back and listen because I don't want to misspeak, but I'm almost positive that's what it was.
Dang, I need to talk to him because I bet you they didn't have this thought until David went to prison and how hard it was to get David's wives pregnant while he was in prison. There was all these theories like, ooh, is someone else stepping in for him? But I remember hearing the most common story was that the wife would go to the prison site and there would be like somehow Paul, because Paul was like, I believe Paul was the attorney for his brother David and was able to help him get some type of rights to where they could facilitate his semen transferring to this van that was on the property of the jail site, and then there was a turkey baster involved. But this is just stories of older generation people.
Yeah.
Like, but this one specifically is one I heard multiple times. So it was like, maybe it was that one. To me, I don't believe that. I think that these men are such narcissists that they would, yes, they want to have a bunch of babies, but don't touch my women. Don't you dare touch my women. So the idea of my brother impregnating you or touching you might feel a little bit weird. But you did hear that the two brothers consented with that semen story, but the wife had no idea. And part of me wonders if the reason why the wife had to have no idea is, again, the ego thing, the narcissism. Like, I need her to think it's my kid because I did that, you know?
Yeah. I just am thinking of these women who, if their husband is in jail or in prison, having to get pregnant and just keep having kids on your own, basically a single mom, knowing that that's not necessary, knowing that they shouldn't have to be doing that, right? They should have a say in if they want, and maybe they do want to get pregnant. I guess I'm putting words into their mouth, but I would imagine if I had a husband in jail, I wouldn't want to keep popping out babies.
Yeah. Well, this is something that I always get so triggered when women will come out of the order. I shouldn't let it get me so triggered, but it bothers me because I'm also a woman and it feels, you just tell me how you would feel if this happened with you. So when women come out of the order and they're still kind of deconstructing and they say, like, I'll say something like, yeah, it was not my choice and they were trying to force me into this marriage. And they'll say something like, well, it was my choice. I did choose to marry my cousin, or I know that I was supposed to. For me, it's like, okay, just like what you were saying, like, do they have a choice to keep having kids? We were not given a choice to not get married. So yes, maybe it was your choice, of the small amount of choices that you were given, right? The choice to not get married wasn't even on the table. The choice to marry outside of the order wasn't even on the table. So I
Yeah.
always wonder, like, how come people coming from these religions feel the need to say that? Like, well, I did have a choice. I did. And maybe it's that mind of like hanging on to a reality that gives them some sort of different perspective on life, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think being able to admit that you've been manipulated and under the control of somebody else is a really hard thing because you realize that all of your choices were just an illusion and that you didn't
Mhm.
actually have control because there were punishments that came with you not making that choice. I think it takes a while for it to sink in that, oh, I was coerced into doing that. I was manipulated into doing it. I was under such fear that I didn't have a choice. I needed to make that choice for self preservation. And so, yeah, I can see how it would bother you, and I can see how they want to defend that they had any sort of control in the matter. And maybe to some degree they did, but ultimately, when you really scroll down, or it's not scroll down, when you really zoom in on it, there are other people pulling the strings.
Yeah, and I have heard too, like, that a lot of them will, going back to the bloodline thing, a lot of women did want to be in Paul's family, because I think there was some of them that saw the benefits that you did get into marrying into the royalty, right? Or they did make it seem as though it was something that could be a better choice or a better option, as far as like maybe your kids will get better treatment in even just the school systems or whatever the
Yeah.
case is. So some women could say, no, I wanted to marry into Paul's family, but it's also the same thing. Like, well, based off of the sad choices you had, maybe in your mind, marrying into the leadership was the best option.
Best
You
of the
think that,
choices.
right, for your posterity and for your children. Because I
Yeah.
also imagine, like, Paul has 27 wives, and I've heard his own wife, who's his sister, talk about how she knew that marrying him was going to give her kids genes, the best genes, and just all of these weird rationalities that they, so I guess you could be right. When someone leaves and has to deconstruct, then to realize, you know my choice was not really my choice. That's a hard pill to
Yeah.
swallow.
Well, just what you said right now about I knew that that was the right thing for my kids and the genes. You have to be so invested in that doctrine. You have to be so invested in that life to really truly not only choose it, but defend it and to double down on it. I don't want people to be like, how dumb can you be? Because it's really like boiling the frog. And like we're saying, the illusion of choice,
Slow.
you really don't have options. So for women to really truly feel that way, that's some heavy stuff going on there to be able to get someone to that point.
Yeah. And it's like you're just digging yourself deeper and deeper into the hole. And so I think it's sometimes just easier to stay in that hole. This one woman was talking about how she realized what the order was. She realized, the light bulb finally went on. And once that happens, it's so much work to crawl out of that hole that you just dug. So she
Yeah,
said that instantly afterwards she had wished that she could turn the light back off. Like, the light bulb came on and she wanted to turn it off and pretend that it didn't. But once it's on, you can't turn it off. And now you are now aware that you are either a part of the problem, enabling the problem.
perpetuating the problem.
Exactly. And you now have to make choices that are really
That's the
hard to
hard
make.
thing. Imagine, imagine you're one of these women who does have children with someone you're related to, right? And then you leave, you find out it's wrong, the goggles come off and you see it clearly. Imagine having to face the reality that you potentially put your children's lives in danger, because
Mm-hmm.
you know that I really don't believe that any mother truly wants to do anything to hurt their child. I feel like if they're hurting their child, it might be because they don't know, they've never been modeled a way to do it right, or
Mm-hmm.
they've been abused themselves, or like something is going on to make them think that they're making the right choice, even though it's not the right choice. And
Mm-hmm.
so imagine having to confront the fact that you made a wrong choice that put your kids in danger, their actual well being, their livelihood, their not their livelihood, their lives, their bodies, their physical bodies. I think that would be really hard to come to terms
Yeah.
with.
I think that's why a lot of them kind of it's a onion that they're peeling, right? You have to first stomach, okay, yeah, I put myself in a bad place. Okay, yeah, I put my kids in a bad place around their dad. Okay, yeah, I also abused the kids. And then it comes with this, it's mourning something you can't change. It's the past now. You can't
Yeah.
go back and fix it. All you can do is move forward and just you're no longer a part of that. But yeah, I think that that's a big. Have you seen the movie Room? You never seen it?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I bawled my eyes out when I saw that, and it how she. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, this woman and her child the woman gets kidnapped. Okay, she gets kidnapped, gets pregnant by the captor. This child only has experienced the room. The room is the child's whole life, right? And then they finally escape, and the woman is very suicidal afterwards. Like it's a very hard transition. The whole also, and for me, I was like, oh my gosh, I would feel so similar to like I was so helpless, couldn't get my child out of this. I also made my child do dangerous things to try to protect us and to try to get us out of the situation. I had to make calls that no mother should ever have to make for the safety of their child. So I actually had my mom watch this when we filmed Escaping Polygamy, and my mom actually left on the show. So a lot of people ask, is your mom still out? She ended up going back. But when she left, for the few months she was out, I had her watch that thinking that that would empower her. And the whole time she was like, why is she suicidal? She's out. She should be happy now. And I think a lot of people have that mindset. You're out of the cult. You should just be happy. The badness is in the past. But they don't realize that there's so much more to decades. You can't just be like, out of sight, out of mind, you know? And
Yeah.
especially for these mothers that they were a big part of the problem. They have to, that's a pill they have to swallow unless they want to carry that problem into the outside world onto the kids still. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a lot. It's a lot to deconstruct. It's probably why most choose not to leave, because they would have to face that reality. They would have to lose everything. So, right, let's talk a little bit about your story for those who aren't familiar. You decide that you don't want to be part of this system and you end up leaving. And what are the consequences of choosing to leave?
Yeah, there's so much at stake. And I was lucky enough that I was not married with kids. That was a battle I never had to have. And I've heard so many women share that their stories on that. And I'm like, thank God I was lucky enough to get out and just right place, right time, you know. But so I didn't have to deal with losing my kids or fighting for my kids, right? Because I never had kids. But losing my family, losing my siblings felt like my children because I was the second oldest and I helped raise them. I took them to school. I made them breakfast, lunch, and dinner some days. Like that responsibility goes on the older kids. So Gerald even talks about it too. He felt like they were ripping his children from him because he was the oldest. So you go through losing your family, you go through losing a community, you go through being then they gaslight you on the way out, like you're the one throwing us in the trash, like you're the terrible person. So you're being gaslit on in all aspects, emotional abuse galore, especially because like you could think of a stranger saying these things to you and it wouldn't affect you in the way that your family and the people that you thought were your protectors are actually the people that want to watch you suffer. It's such a twisted game that they do on you. And I think that that's why I advocate so much for therapy, because if you're only listening to that, those were the only people in your life, right? And they're sitting there like, good thing you're going to hell and not taking anyone else down with you, you little demon. You know, if that's the only voices you're hearing, you start to believe it. So you have to go to therapy. You have to get some other voice other than that, because I do think that that's a big reason why there's tends to be suicide after leaving a cult, because it's so hard to, how do you change your way of thinking when you don't even understand that that's the problem, right? You're just like, what's wrong with me? I don't know what's wrong with me. But yeah, so you lose your family, you lose your community, and you're also at a battle with yourself now. And I'm going to go back to that subject when my mom said, why can't you just be happy, right? I think a lot of people leave the cult and be like, I thought this was going to fix everything, and it didn't, because you still brought the trauma with you. The trauma is still in your mind, body, and soul. It's not going to magically disappear, right? And your family's always going to be your family. Your childhood's always going to be your childhood. So yeah, it's like if you physically leave the baggage, and it does feel like a weight is lifted for sure. When I first left, it was like, I don't have to go to church every Sunday anymore. I don't have to, fast Thursdays, meditations, all of those things. I can finally start to breathe. But there's all these paths now, and I don't know which one to take, because in the order I was only given one path, and now there's all these paths, and a lot of them are toxic, and I chose those ones. Not realizing.
Oh man, well, we've done whole episodes on that, right? Toxic relationships after leaving cults. So I want to go back to, if they think they are true descendants of Jesus Christ, but the genetics are getting all scawampus because they're doing the wrong thing, they still bring in other outsiders, like other women, to kind of mix up the bloodline. But then how do they justify muddying it up, in huge air quotes, by doing that?
Oh, this is such a good, you're sparking a really big topic. So first of all, they love bringing in women. They do not want to bring in men. They'll pretend, like with Tom Green, for example. Tom Green, we know who Tom Green is, right? He was a polygamist who left the LDS church and devoted his life to polygamy because he was a true believer in God. Married a bunch of underage girls. And in his final life, last days, he joins the order. The order happily takes the women, pretends that they kind of like dance around the idea that the men will also get married. The men don't. The women all get married. Even when Tom Green dies, his number is 269. They put it on his gravestone. They put it on his coffin. And the wives all went to a man with the number 69. So it was planned that his wives were going to go to number 69, and Tom Green got number 269. It's such a weird thing, but my point is, they like to take the women, they don't want to take the men, and they will justify it by, again, bloodlines is still a thing, and this is where racism comes in. If they believe that the women, they do their research on the women's blood, basically. There were women who were LeBaron, I think it was LeBaron, yeah.
Another polygamous Mormon group.
Yeah, another polygamous group, and they were trying to get women from there, but there was some lineages that had Hispanic bloodline. So in the order, they call it black. If anything that's not white is black, basically. So that black blood, yeah. So for a long time, I thought Mexican, Puerto Rican, literally like Filipino, black. That's what they called it. Yeah.
Oh, no.
So I know, I feel bad for, like, that's why I always second guess myself. Even now, I'm like double checking, like, is Hispanic okay to say? Because we were so like in the like, that's black and we're white, and this is the pure blood and that's the dirty blood, right? And the crazy thing is, even in the order members who were like OG, joined in the first 1935 days, right, had Di Fabrizio as the last name, which is Italian, and that was a little too dirty. So a lot of the Italian Di Fabrizios didn't get married because they were like, that's a little too close to black. so stupid.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so you'll see that where they'll do their research on the bloodlines, and there's even women who talk about, like Priscilla. She was like, thank God my baby is half Filipino, because then they won't try to get her blood. But even people who leave and have daughters, they'll still try to like keep track of the daughters that are out there to see if they can poach them and get them to come back. So they will. There's been FLDS that have joined. I've seen that. I've seen AUB, which is Cody Brown's group. They've gotten women from there, but you rarely ever. I honestly don't think. I can only think of one time where a man from a different group got one of the women from the order, but he had her leave with him, if that makes sense.
Mm.
And that's also why I feel like they won't like to affiliate too much with other groups unless they know that they're getting a lot of women. I know that it's like they keep a tally, because especially if, like I was saying, like if Paul's going to sit here and say how to get more girls to the order, they're racking their brains on how to get this system going.
Yeah.
And Jessica said a really good point. She was like, they don't see a girl leaving the order as one person. They say, oh, dang, that was 10. That could have been 10 over there. Like we could have got her married at this time. We just lost 10 people. So it's a bigger issue when a girl leaves. A guy, okay, we'll just get another worker bee to do your job.
Wow. Imagine that conversation. Hey, come visit the order. We want you to check it out. But real quick, pit stop, gonna need your blood.
Yep.
And then if you pass, if you don't have anything a little too dark in there, then you can stay. Please stay.
Yeah. I don't know if they blood test people coming in, but I know that they know like they do research on the names like Barlow and LeBaron, and making sure that there's no, you know what's weird? Native American is okay. Native American is in the 12 tribes of Israel. Yeah, but
that is considered Lamanite in Mormon terms.
I don't know.
So if anything were to be demonized, it would be the Lamanites. According to people who aren't familiar, the Book of Mormon claims that the Native American people were Lamanites who were cursed with dark skin, and so they have always been seen as less than. I think they're lightening up on this doctrine, but horrible thing if you look into it. They were pulling kids off their reservations, putting them in white Mormon family homes, lining them up, taking pictures, and saying, look how white and delightsome they've become since being with white Mormon families. Their skin color is changing, the curse of dark. It's a whole racist thing. So I'm real. Wait, you didn't know that?
No, I have not heard the light and delightsome. So it's
white
like
and delightsome. They changed the scripture.
Cain? Because Cain was
that's a separate one.
Oh.
That's a separate one. It was the whole story of the Nephites and the Lamanites, and I don't know, someone did something wrong, and so they cursed the Lamanites with dark skin. And the whole reason that this came about, well, this is what I think there's evidence of this, I'm almost positive, that the reason that came about, it was the mound builder myth at the time. So settlers were coming to the States. They were seeing these mounds that seemed to be advanced. And they're like, there's no way these, quote, savages could have built these structures. They must have been white at some point.
Oh my gosh. They're correlating their skin color to like mental capacity.
So Joseph Smith was like, oh, I have the answer. And then he created the whole story of the Nephites and the Lamanites who came from Jerusalem. And he claimed that the Native American people are actually from Jerusalem, but they were cursed with dark skin. So anyway, my point is, I'm really shocked that they kind of missed that whole story, because it's very much in the roots of Mormonism, and they're fine with the Lamanite blood. Which again, I don't believe is a true story. Just for clarification.
Just for clarification, yeah, we don't believe any of this mumbo jumbo. But yeah. I wonder if it's in the earlier stages, because I do think that Ortel, the leader before Paul, one of his wives was like half Native American, and so maybe that's why they grandfathered that in or something. But then the DeFabrizio one kind of just, I don't know. It's so interesting to see how the racism is so deep embedded in it. So you're saying that the Native Americans were cursed. Was that the same thing that you believe that Cain was also cursed with, that same thing, like with the dark skin?
So from what I remember and what I've looked into, the curse of Cain was a skin of blackness. So that's also something that Joseph Smith added because that's in the Bible. And I think it says, and people, if you, or the Bible, if you know your Bible, let me know. Because I think in other Bibles, it says a curse of darkness was put upon him. I think. So, or
I thought I
a curse
remembered it
of
was like a
blackness.
curse upon his. Yeah, there's a lot of
But
different interpretations.
But Joseph Smith added a skin of blackness. So, like, he made it more racist than other Christians at the time. So, they were saying that about black people, but the Lamanites, those were supposed to be the Native Americans. So, different.
Yeah, and this was something that was so interesting to me with, I mean, all of this is so like, the more I talk about it, the more I feel so like woo woo, like, yeah, and I believed it, you guys. But I was also a little kid.
Yeah.
But think I would ask this question. So if Abel and Cain, that whole story was real, and Cain was such a bad guy, and his whole posterity was cursed, why did Noah bring, because Noah's the one that brought the posterity, right? Because everyone died after the flood. So that means someone in there had to have been of Cain's descendant. And I
Uh-huh.
asked this question, and their answer was that the promise had to be fulfilled, that they had to have the generations of the darkness, and their whole posterity had to be cursed based on what he
Oh
did.
my gosh.
And that's
It's
where the
just
whole,
so
yeah.
wrong. It's so cringy and it feels gross to even talk about because we clearly don't believe it. And I want to say too, growing up Mormon in Utah, where we just did the Sunday school lesson, and sure, like I really didn't understand that that's what it was saying because I was just like, sure, another Bible story that's confusing and I don't get. It wasn't until I was an ex-Mormon, maybe 5, 6 years in, and really looked into it that I was like, wait, I was supposed to believe what about the Native Americans? Like, I was shocked that that was something that I was supposed to believe. But not even that long ago, one generation before me in the 80s, we've shown videos of this with Kara, Nuanto. We'll probably link it or something. So we did a whole episode on this of cartoons that were made in the 80s that were like, oh wow, my skin is so white and pretty. And then, don't you love my pretty white skin? And then it shows a little Lamanite child who's dark and wishes her skin was lighter. Like, this was not that long ago.
Oh my
That they were
gosh.
heavy on the racism. It's only our generation that didn't really get a whole lot of that because they were phasing it out, obviously.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to Jesus. You were telling me off camera that you believed Jesus was white.
Oh yeah. If you tell any polygamist from where I came from that he was not white, they will laugh at you. And I've had my
That
dad
doesn't,
laugh. Yeah.
it doesn't even make
You're
sense.
laughing at me. I'm telling you, and this was my argument. If Christ was in the Middle East, wouldn't he be Middle Eastern? but I'm the insane one. I
Yeah.
remember I always reference that Will Ferrell in Zoolander where he's like, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills because no
Oh
one
my.
else, yeah, everyone else is sitting there like, yeah, Amanda, you're a silly Billy over there. And I'm like, I guess I am. I'm a silly
Yeah.
Billy for thinking that a Middle East would be Middle Eastern.
Yeah. That's
But
ridiculous. I definitely remember the depictions of Jesus, the mainstream Mormon Jesus. He looked pretty white, in my
yeah.
opinion. If you asked me what his ethnicity was as a kid, I've been like, he's white.
Do you remember? So we did a whole episode series. Well, we kind of tried to do the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, and Taylor Frankie Paul. Remember her?
Uh-huh.
I was watching her. Sorry to like take it onto the Secret Lives of Mormon Wife, but on her TikTok, you can see a picture of Jesus, the Mormon Jesus, in the background, and a comment in the description box was like, in the comment section was like, "Why do you have an Abercrombie and Fitch model hanging out in the background of your?" She's like, "That's Jesus." But it's true.
Stop.
They take this like white American Scandinavian looking man, and they say that that's Christ, and that's kind of what the order did too. They lighten his skin, they lighten his eyes. I,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, and they don't want to believe that he. To me, they're like, oh, Christ is white, and he spoke English, and he lived polygamy. Like they can't fathom anything other than that. because it's, I feel like,
Yikes.
narcissism if you think about it. Has to
Yeah.
be
So
more like
you actually remember them telling you that he was white? Because now I'm thinking, like, of course I thought he was white as a kid, but no one ever explicitly said to me that I remember,
he was
oh,
Caucasian.
Jesus was white. He just kind of appeared that way. But because when you told me, no, we believed that he was white, it was a shock to me. But now that I'm thinking back, I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure that was my childhood too. They just didn't explicitly say it.
Right. But the pictures say it, right?
Yeah.
The pictures are
Yeah.
definitely, and of course, everyone has those like generic pictures of Christ in the red robe, the like cartoonish ones.
Yeah.
But the ones that they come out with are lighter,
The
wider.
portrait.
Yeah. And even like they, in the order, they would cut the hair short because they also didn't want to have any of the men having long hair. And they don't want Christ to be an example of long hair. So they would have the hair shorter on Christ. So he'd
Oh
be a good
my
example.
gosh. So he'd be a good example. I just had this epiphany, and people have probably had it already throughout this episode. I'm just a little late because it's C2C After Dark. We're filming this really late tonight.
Yeah.
Um, of course Jesus had to be white, because if you're direct descendants of Jesus, according to them, you have to have all white blood. So of course
hmm
Jesus would have to be white.
Yeah. I think the FLDS believes in something similar as far as the bloodline because I remember, I think it was Sam, Sam and Melissa
Uh-huh.
saying that they believed that, I want to say it was them. Hopefully they don't get mad if it wasn't them. It was someone from the FLDS saying that if they left, then they truly believed that their bloodline no longer relates them to the God's people. They no longer have that
Whoa.
bloodline. Did you ever hear this?
That's also not how it works.
Yeah,
But I
they
get that they
believe it
would
though.
use that as a fear tactic. It makes
hmm
sense.
You no longer have that. That's how important your bloodline is, and you no longer have access to that now that you've left, right? But
Whoa.
I have one more question on this because now I'm having the hypocrisy in it all, and how does this link up? Because remember I told you the whole story of, and I think you mentioned this as well, where they believed that the white people were born on Earth, the demons in hell that chose Satan's side, us chose Jesus' side, and then there were fence sitters, and those are the
Yeah.
ones that came out. They're never going to get to go to heaven again, and they are the black skin, right? That's what they taught us. But then you have the Cain and Abel story, where it's Cain's posterity had to all be cursed. So was this all this story in heaven that they all planned together, that this is what's going to happen to all of these demons? And we know that Cain's going to kill Abel. And, so then everything's
Yeah.
just pre-planned and they already know everything. That
And
doesn't make
so
any
nothing
sense.
matters because it's all destiny.
I don't know why I'm trying to make sense of it. It's not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to make sense of
Yeah.
it.
It's a little tricky when you try to apply critical thinking to some of those stories.
And that's why it works on these members that are born into it or have been broken down into a shell of a person. Then they have to rebuild that person that doesn't have the critical thinking. So that's why when you were saying like, well, why does anyone join a cult, or why wouldn't anyone leave, or like those questions that are silly questions that people ask? It's because the critical thinking is not there. It's critical
not
thinking doesn't
fully online.
thrive there. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just watching a reel, I think it was yesterday, from some psychologist, and I don't remember his name, guys, sorry. But he said the way to control the masses is to keep them confused. And I feel like that's what my childhood was, just a whole lot of confusion. I don't really know this Nephite Lamanite story, but sure, I'll go along with it. I don't know, that sounds a little crazy, but whatever you say. They
Did
just
they
have
have
to keep it weird enough to where you think you're the problem because you don't get it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Gaslighting you into thinking that, oh, it's just your fault. You're not righteous enough and then you feel kind of bad that you don't understand it. It seems like everyone around me is understanding it,
Yeah.
so I'm just going to pretend that I understand it.
Yeah.
But did you have that? Don't questioning is kind of like a sinful thing. Like, oh, questioning is like questioning God. Are you questioning God? Did
Yeah,
you have that?
it's you're not supposed to doubt your doubts. They say don't, or they say doubt your doubts. I think I said
What
it
does that
backwards.
mean?
They say doubt your doubts. So anytime you have a doubt pop into your head, you need to go, is that really a doubt? Which makes no sense because you would technically get stuck in a circle there. But
This
they're
is a
telling
doubt.
you just thought stopping cliches, right? Don't even pay attention to that little tiny thought that has any sort of question. You need to really consider if you should be considering this question. They keep you
What? And
confused.
this is referring to every question you have on the church?
Yeah, pretty
And
much.
every
If you
doubt on
have
the
any
church.
doubts
But
about the church.
that's interesting. But it will not be applied on doubts on other things, right? Like doubts on the Catholic Church, doubts on the those are
Oh,
healthy
those are
doubts, but
definitely
doubts
wrong
on our
according to
church.
them. They called the Catholic Church the Great Abominable Church
Why?
because they didn't want you to be Catholic. I don't know.
Oh,
Why did they do anything?
abominable. I know. We're sitting here like, what? Wait, let's try to make sense of it because our
Hmm.
brains are
A
now
plus B, X squared over 2, carry the 1, and maybe it'll
like it's
make
like that
sense.
SpongeBob meme. Like I'm doing it. Get to the end.
Exactly.
Waste of time. Just kidding.
Yeah, fail. I never did well with math.
I
Anyways.
same. I think it was the homeschool and the fact that I was in a cult school. They didn't
Oh my
really know how to teach us
gosh.
math. But I think that because of this critical thinking that we have, that's why we didn't thrive there. We started to use those critical thinking, and then it's once it's ignited, kind of like that woman who the light finally went on. You can't shut it off, and so now this is a self-aware time. Now you are physically in your body. You are conscious, and to go back into the unconscious is almost impossible.
Yeah. Yep.
So, and that's why it's like none of it's making any sense, and it does keep me up at night sometimes where I'm like, so is the leadership just this emotional, like unemotional, just it's so far out of touch with their emotions, their anybody else, just this narcissist that's dug themselves into this crazy place? Or are they fully aware and they know the benefits and they don't care who has to suffer for them to get on top? You know?
It's probably a little bit of both. And it probably varies amongst people. I think everyone probably has a little sense that something's off, but they choose to ignore it. And then there's probably people who are really vindictive and do have an agenda and know the way they can manipulate people for power.
Do you think that it has to take, so to be a cult leader and someone who's willing to do the things that they're willing to do you think it has to take a lack of self-awareness to be able to do that? Or what is the key point? Because for you hear this, oh, narcissists are usually the ones on top because they're the ones that are willing to step on others to get there, and the empaths are usually the ones on the bottom, sadly, that's how a lot of the world works. So with these cult leaders, what do you think it is that gets them where they are?
I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I feel like in order to gain that much power, control, and submission from a group of people, you do have to have little to no empathy for those you're hurting because it's all for your own personal gain and power. And I feel like usually that comes with narcissistic tendencies. So I'm not saying every cult leader is a narcissist. I think every cult leader has narcissistic tendencies for the most part. And they're unable to take into consideration the people whom they're hurting because they're so self-absorbed and have this need for power. It's probably a deep-seated need, whether it's something that wasn't met for them as a child or who knows what it is. They need to have the affection and attention and submission of others to feel powerful, and so they'll do whatever it takes to get that.
That's so true. And it's such a, they're focusing so much on the external and controlling the external that they probably rarely ever focus on the internal. Because like what you're saying, it kind of is describing that seeking validation externally. You don't necessarily seek that if you have it internally, right?
Right. If you feel any sort of worthiness already, you're not seeking it elsewhere.
Yeah. So these men could just be, these kind of like little toddlers that just don't even know how to self-regulate. They need this whirlwind of people to do it for them. And that's where the lack of accountability, I could go on such a tangent on this, but I won't. It's just, it's so interesting how they are these cult leaders, but yet they are actually so fragile when you break it down.
It's this self-aggrandizing behavior that leads people to think they are direct descendants of Jesus. It does not get more us versus them, more superiority complex than that to say I'm a direct descendant of Jesus. So, wow, this has been a ride, Amanda. Thank you for sharing all of this, and I hope it was interesting to people out there and maybe a little bit informative. I'm sorry if it feels like I don't know my Mormon facts. I have left like 15, it's been like 15 years since I've been out. So I
Yes,
try to forget details.
same. And I was gonna say, if anyone has any to chime in on where we were maybe inaccurate
Yeah.
on some, because we were fuzzy on a
We're
lot of the
trying our best,
stories.
guys. Trying our best.
But let us know if you have more. Like, what did you hear, and what
Yeah.
verses we may be referring to? Because some people are you guys can be so good at like, oh, that's actually this verse from this book.
Yeah,
And to me,
some
I'm like,
people are
I
great.
can't.
Our goal, my disclaimer and excuse, if you will, is we didn't come on here to talk about Bible stories. We came on to talk about polygamous Jesus. So that was our goal, and we kind of went off on some tangents that were very interesting. So anyways, thanks for joining us on this ride. Definitely go follow Amanda's channel at AmandaRaeGrant, right? That's your new handle?
Yes, I've got
Okay.
Instagram and YouTube.
Yeah, Instagram and YouTube. We'll put the links in the description. Make sure you tune in for our 200th episode, guys. It's gonna be bomb. These women, we have 7 women from several different cults. We got the polygamous Mormonism with Amanda Rae representing. We got some Hasidic Judaism. We have extreme fundamentalist Islam. We have extreme fundamentalist Christian. We have what else? Amish Mennonite representation, Nexium. I know I'm missing Children of God. It's just a stacked deck of incredible women. You're going to love it. If you want to support the podcast, best way, always interact with the post, leave a comment. Love this amazing community who is so supportive to our guests and boosts the algorithm, helps more people find it, and liking, sharing all the YouTube things. Make sure you subscribe and hit that bell, though, so you don't miss the 200th episode. If you want to see shorter clips, we do have a clips channel at Cults of Consciousness Clips where you can watch 8 to 10 minute segments of our show. It may put you onto an episode that you have missed in the past, and you can go back and watch the long form. And we're going to Mexico in October. Amanda, you should come. It's going to be amazing.
I really want to.
We're going to the coast.
I'm going to try.
Yeah, because Jessica from Escaping Polygamy, if you guys don't know, went to Costa Rica and her husband Todd, and it was so awesome. So you have to come to the next one.
I know, I'm sad I missed out on that one. You guys look like you had so much fun.
I know. We did. We totally did. So the link is in the description. If you like this video, check out all of the other videos. We just counted. There are 18 videos we have done with Amanda. So if you like this conversation, you're definitely going to want to check out her playlist. We'll link it probably here with another video. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.